much the surfacing is going to cost.
Well, Kurt will probably be down tomorrow.
But I think we can cameras here.
Yeah, okay.
You gotta watch.
Okay, there we go. Now we're all set.
You're on?
Yep.
What about the cameras? The cameras here.
We're on streaming and all that fun stuff.
I thought I should go send them to my computer is not using these.
No, I got it.
Maybe that pole
Well, I
that's
have the whole packet.
northeast of you.
Oh, well,
Maybe that's fine.
Yeah, we'll probably put the cameras up.
Maybe.
Do the
Oh, I got to turn my computer on.
Only cover so much
Yeah,
area.
that's fine.
Get up and say the pledge and then I'll leave.
I gotta send it. Oh, you're gonna send it? Oh, you're gonna send it. Okay.
I'll just turn this on. I'll hold.
Okay, we're ready.
This conference will now be recorded.
You good? Will you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a public hearing scheduled for tonight. Public hearing regarding proposed local law dissolving the planning board and vesting the planning board powers in the zoning board of appeals. And so just a little background on this particular hearing. For the last several years, maybe even longer, it's been challenging to find people willing to participate as being a member of the planning board and zoning board. And after some discussions over the last year or two, and knowledge of other towns who have merged their planning boards with their zoning boards of appeals, we have ventured to head down the same path. This is brought about by both the chairs of the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, brought to the town board, and the town board is exercising the right to proceed forward with looking to vest those planning board powers into the zoning board of appeals. So at this time, we'll open up any comments, questions, anything that pertains to this particular public hearing.
Joe, if I could just clarify one thing real quick.
Yeah, please do.
You had a note about other towns. With the flags that I have, and where I've seen it is actually other villages.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I haven't gone out and really researched all any other towns that have done it, but the authorization that's in the village law mirrors the authorization that's in the town law. So that is the genesis for the idea brought forth. We have one other client village that has done it successfully last summer. And it's worked out pretty well for them. Some growing pains for sure. You know, you get 20 board members taking over the zoning board functions if they carry over the zoning board of appeal and vice versa. Zoning board members that have to perform planning functions. So there is a learning curve and a bit of education. I've talked to the chair of the planning board already about some of that. We talked about it in the last planning board meeting. How to work an agenda, how to go through applications and things like that, if this does come to pass. So you've got members that are thinking about, asking to be carried over to the Constituted Zoning Board of Appeals, already thinking about how they're going to do this. So I just wanted to clarify that one comment that you made there.
No, I appreciate that, and I misspoke. You're right. The municipality was the one that was the village, so thank you, Matt. So anyone in the public that has any questions, comments? Anyone on our, Stu, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. For those that may not know me, I'm Stu Baker, 117 Champlain Avenue. I served on the town planning board for more than 10 years, 6 of those as chairman, and I spent the majority of my working career in local government, community planning and development. My question for the town board is this: if the issue is you aren't getting volunteers by the planning board and zoning board, how is consolidating both into one board going to solve that problem?
Well, currently there's it's a seven-member planning board, and it's a five-member zoning board of appeals, so a total of 12 people. Consolidating would only require to have 5 people on the board with one or two alternates. So as it currently stands, there's only 3 individuals who serve on the zoning board of appeals, and therefore everything that comes before that zoning board of appeals has to be unanimously supported in order to be able to pass. So that's been the challenge of some people that have just stayed on simply because there's no one else able to take that on. So it's a good point. A lot of agencies, a lot of, especially volunteer-related ones, are hurting to find members. So this is what's been discussed over the last year, maybe even when you were here, Stu. I forget what it was like when you were on the board, but in terms of numbers. So we'd go from basically 2 boards with a total of 12 plus some alternates to 5 and a couple alternates.
So it's going to be a 5-member board with how many alternates?
1 or 2.
Okay. What will be the name of this new consolidated board?
Well, we haven't officially determined that. I think in the other municipality, it's just considered a zoning board of appeals. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, it's funny that Stu asked that question, because I posed that question to the town board for their consideration. Some people might know that Saranac Lake, they've done this, and I can't remember the exact name of their board. I should actually Google it and look it up. But it is a kind of a hybrid name. And honestly, that led me to the question of what is the town want to call it? Because the town board could name it the Ticonderoga Planning and Zoning Board, Zoning and Planning Board, the Land Development Board. I think Saranac Lake is some hybrid like that. They call it the Saranac Lake. And I think it's a joint village and town board up there. I think they've actually come together on those. And I think they call it the Land Development Board. Some kind of a hybrid between, zoning board and planning board. But Stu's question is a good one. I think to be determined by the town board as to what you want to call it. And then, one of the options might be even to pull planning and zoning board for their thoughts on it.
So does the town board have a resolution prepared for tonight creating this consolidated board?
Yeah, we do.
No, you don't.
We have a
Draft.
yeah, draft.
Last month's meeting, and I don't know if anything has changed with the town board. The town board's plan, if you will, was to open a public hearing tonight and leave it open.
Right, several months.
Even the next month. So the plan, at least, again, unless something changed, was not to take any final action tonight, but just, put it out there, put the local law out there, vesting these powers. And the local law is somewhat simple. It simply refers to the laws and vests those powers now in this board. But the local law has been drafted to answer your question, yes, to accomplish this. But for our last meeting, the board was going to leave the public hearing open a couple of months so that, people could respond.
Okay. I'd certainly recommend that the town board settle on a name for this new consolidated board before they adopt the local law. What will be the training requirements for members of this board? As the town board knows, and members of the public may not, under New York State law, planning board and zoning board members are required to get, I believe it's 2 or 4 hours of training annually now. 4 hours of training. And I'll just note for the information of those that may not be aware, New York State law doesn't require any training requirements for town board members, be it the town supervisor or the other board members. And yet it requires 4 hours for planning board members and zoning board members. So, and Matt, you're smiling because you know the question. What is going to be the training requirement for members of this consolidated board that are serving the functions of both planning board and zoning board? Are we looking at 8 hours of required training annually for members of this new board?
That's a good question. The answer is no, it will remain at 4. Unless the town board, not, that aren't really necessarily interested in carrying forward if there are enough members. So we would go through some training of how to do this. You know, again, certainly the planning board, then over the zoning board, as I was explaining to them the other night at the end of the planning board meeting, it's a bit more procedural, right? It's quasi-judicial. You're almost a court-like function when you're a zoning board of appeals, which, you know, was of interest to a lot of those members that they were asking some good questions, and you know, we'll go through training on how to do this, even how to get it there. You know, because you got, as you know, Stu, with zoning planning board matters, they bounce back and forth. So how do you deal with that on one agenda? And you've got public hearing for zoning, public hearing for planning, but it's all doable in concept. It just takes some, you know, coordinated balance.
Well, I guess that brings me back to my question, though, which Joe, you skirted around when I asked it at the start. If the issue is the town board is having trouble finding volunteers to fill this, what is the town board's strategy to be able to maintain what will now be a 7-member consolidated combined board, 5 regular members with 2 alternates? You know, certainly, you know, you recognize the problem of not having enough volunteers. That issue remains with a combined board. What is the town board approach to keep those seats filled?
Well, right now, we know we have people that would be willing to fill them and have an interest in being on the board. I don't have a crystal ball to know what the future brings. I'm sure there are other strategies, options that could be explored, you know, but I don't know how to answer that question.
It's the same strategy we use for committee volunteers or the board volunteers. You look for viable candidates that are willing to put in the time, conduct the training, get engaged, have the background to be objective, whether it's planning, zoning, or many committees, and any volunteer opportunity that's within the town. Our strategy is the same. It's a challenge getting volunteers, not just for these types of duties, but any other in the community. And so our challenges are similar. We advertise, we reach out to people we know through personal and professional relationships and through community relationships to try to fill these positions. It doesn't go without effort. It's just, you know, what we're trying to do now is make the steps so we have an effective board. We feel for the community that we have, and you know, going back to what Matt brought up, the village of Saranac Lake has a planning department, and they refer to it as their planning and development board, which is what they have in place. I pulled it up on their website while we were listening to Mr. Baker. So that would be my plan going forward, and then before we do the resolution, just make sure we have effective training in place so that's clearly understood for our current and any future members of the board.
Well, I respectfully suggest that the responsibilities of individual members on this new combined board are going to demand more than 4 hours of training a year. Just keeping up with the current case law for planning boards and zoning boards alone is cumbersome. And that's one thing that board members need to do to keep current. And these new combined board members will be responsible for now a lot of sections of local town code. And there's going to be a learning curve there as well. While I understand the board's desire to create this consolidated board, I'm concerned that new members of this board are going to find it's quite a lot to deal with between the responsibilities of zoning board of appeals and planning board. Thank you for the opportunity to come.
Yeah, thank you, Stu. Did you have any, can I put it back in your court, really, because you have some experience in this area? I mean, do you have any thoughts other than what you just shared as far as, you know, obtaining, acquiring, maintaining, sustaining members, on the board? I mean, you
Well, I'm glad you asked. I think one thing that's been lacking from the town board historically, and perhaps continuing up to the present, is recognition of the volunteers. In 10 years of serving on the planning board, including 6 years as chair, I never saw anyone thanked for their service, with the exception of when they initially volunteered to serve. People would resign after a decade or more of service with absolutely no recognition. And there's actually such a thing as national volunteer recognition, and I think it's worth encouraging the town board to take advantage of that and more, to thank those that are volunteering their time in service to the functions of our local government.
That's a good point, thank you. Anyone else have any? Okay. Like Matt had mentioned, the intent of this was because we were expecting we'd get some feedback from the community and to leave this public hearing open at least for a couple months, just to be able to vet through some of those items. So we will do that. So we'll just leave this open. The next item is some opening remarks before we move into the bulk of the agenda. As far as a coronavirus update, in the last month there have been very few new positives in the town, and even fewer from where they were in the county back earlier this year throughout the county, so that's a good sign. Vaccinations are continuing to roll out. Currently, 28% of our population has become fully vaccinated, and also the Public Health Department is looking to set up a clinic in Ticonderoga sometime in May for the other population of adults who they seek to benefit from having a localized clinic provided here. So more information to come on that. And then also there's a tentative rabies clinic scheduled in Ticonderoga for June 8th from 6 to 8 at the Ticonderoga Highway Garage, and pre-registration with Essex County Department of Health is suggested. I don't know if you have anything else, Tanya. Okay. With that, we will move on into public comment. Anyone from the public is welcome to ask a comment, ask a question. Okay, if there's no comments, we'll move on to the agenda. Public Works. So, the Water Sewer Department's looking to purchase an F-250 to replace its current F-250. It's got over 100,000 miles on it from 2015. We've got a few members looking to receive some certification, grade B operators, as well as some additional New York Rural Water Association training up in the coming year. And we had some discussion on the Chilson Eagle Lake water improvement project. Currently, BNL is working on the map planning report that will be hopefully finalized here pretty soon, so we can go ahead and schedule a public hearing for that and move forward to meeting the deadline for submission of a final map planning report by June of this year. Veterans Road, we're going to be going up to bid today on that project. That's the culvert, road culvert replacement project that was fully funded through the Bridge New York grant. And we're also looking to coordinate some water replacement plumbing across the bridge with some of the remaining funds from the water project, the well water project. The water plant, you had mentioned before that the well pump, actually the motor, had failed, so that should be, the that motor should be arriving here in next week sometime. There were some questions that were brought up as to having an extra spare motor. Of course, we have 2 pumps in that well field per the requirements to have a redundancy in case one does fail, like we just experienced. But the recommendation from the from AES is not that we need to have a second pump on hand. These are kind of anomalies when they go this quickly, and they are 2 different sized pumps. So, just think what else Greg and I spoke about. Let's see. We are continuing with the water district consolidation, working towards consolidating the numerous districts within our town, but we just need to kind of work through some of the particular ones that are on the periphery or for whatever reason over the years have not properly been tabulated in the system, so we're making good progress in that regard. The water meters, AES is applying for a 50% grant for the meters, which will be just under $2 million. And remember, it's about a $4 million project. And they will be looking to go through EFC and maybe possibly USDA rural development. We're looking to focus on the funding and design of the next upcoming year and a half, with construction to follow in 23 and 24. And as it was suggested, we still need to decide specifically which meter system we'll be going with. Members of this board, a few of them have gone through a presentation process that was provided a number of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. We'll be going back to that one more time just to get an update on the different options before making a decision. But that's where that project stands. Water softening. AES had received a report from their sub-consultant specialized in this area, and the board had a little bit of a flavor of what some of the results were regarding options for handling the water softening of the well water. So they'll be presenting a plan at the next meeting on that topic. Lead service line replacement. That project is out to bid, and the bid opening is looking to be scheduled sometime in the end of April. The wastewater treatment plant temporary ventilation project, they had their pre-construction meeting recently, and the contractor is expected to start sometime in mid-May. There's the Speedies permit. Reviewed that, and there's some items pertaining to the new phosphorus limits that still need to be kind of included in the long-term solution. So there'll be some more discussion on how to, on any additional adjustments upgrades that may need to take shape at the wastewater treatment plant. But we'll be having more discussion on that at in the next upcoming meetings. See, the Portage project has already started. They're working currently on the Daylit stream adjacent to the community building, installing a vortex separation unit, and then work will begin from there back up on the Portage with the remaining utility lines. There was a question. I think someone had asked a question, I think at the meeting, maybe it was you, Tom, about materials. You guys know materials?
Well, about being stored, or they were stored.
Yeah.
If they pre-bought them, I think it was part of that,
We
right?
bought them,
Right.
according to Greg, they're being stored at the vendor's plant. Now, we're not storing.
We're not stored, right, but he did say the majority of the materials have been purchased.
Right.
They were purchased last year, so it shouldn't impact any current cost of material increases. AES is finishing up their report on the evaluation of all pump stations and hope to have that presentation ready at the next committee meeting. They've also been working on a geographical information system to help locate all of the assets within in the community pertaining to water, sewer, as well as any other assets, highway, so forth. So So we're gonna look to set up a workshop sometime in the next couple of months for some training on that system. And then the last item I had has to do with potential to look for an Office of Community Renewal grant to hone in on the Oakham Avenue area, and it would be for a full street reconstruction, water, sewer, and storm management and pavement project. Typically, these projects are based on income surveys, and if they succeed, then it would be a pretty much 100% grant coverage of that particular cost for that project. So this is one of the items that is part of our future water project and water system and sewer system improvements throughout the community. So they'll be working on that in the coming year. That's a lot. That's what I have for water sewer. And there's just one resolution. And that resolution is to go out through New York State mini bid for an F-250 utility body with a lift gate and a plow. This is something that was discussed at the water sewer committee.
I'll move it.
Thanks, Dave.
Second?
Thanks, Tom. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So carried.
That's so nice. Stand to hear and see.
No.
Sorry.
Okay, airport. The airport met this past week on Tuesday. We haven't met for a few months, but sales for February were 363, and in March we're nearly 500. Still working on a few remaining items from last year. The FAA had changed some of their landing approach updates, so still trying to work through that piece. Payment box, still making some adjustments for that for those who tie down their aircraft. And we're looking to schedule a fuel tank inspection, or annual inspection sometime in May. And as far as resolutions, I just got two. One is to appoint John Hanna, Ernie Tobin, Brian Duros, Dave Liliano, Dave Woods, Ash Alexander, and myself to the airport committee.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So carried. And the second resolution is to accept a Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act for 2021 grant in the amount of $9,000. And this would be expended at the Ticonderoga Municipal Airport. And this resolution also gives the supervisor authorization to execute that contract.
I'll move it.
Second.
Thanks. Just to clarify too, we received a CARES Act funding last year, $20,000. So this is kind of in the same vein. The federal government is providing some stimulus money, which is one of the areas that they're looking towards. So, all in favor?
Aye.
So carried. Okay. Public safety.
We met on March 23rd at 8 o'clock. There's no public participation. Councilman Woods, states the board approved for the department head to hire another part-time officer. Police Department Chief Delbert went over his monthly report. He had 197 calls for service, 19 incident reports, 11 arrests, 40 uniform traffic tickets, and 6 accidents investigated. And the new vehicle is, we know that's already been ordered. It's a 2021 Dodge Charger. It's expected delivery in June of 2021. Sergeant Belden is still out with an injury stemming from an arrest with a combative subject. And still, the Ticonderoga Police Department is not allowing any citizens inside the building unless they are being processed for an arrest or it is absolutely necessary. If you want to report a complaint, please call 911 and request an officer to contact you by telephone. If you're not an emergency, call 911 and Essex County Dispatch Center will send an officer to your location immediately. The Codes Department, Brianna, goes over the Codes monthly report. Dave Woods asked why they were, what their status was on racetrack road issues. Rihanna states there was a water issue and it has been restored. Dave Burrow states he is working with Matt Fuller on the racetrack road issue and will keep the board updated. Rihanna also states that it has been brought to their attention regarding a possible junkyard on Route 22. Rihanna states they sent out an order of remedy in late last fall. They are doing a follow-up to see what's going on. The codes department had 10 permits issued, 2 complaints, 2 remedies, and there was some notes of interest that they had. They had 2 complaints and they were both remedied. Trainings, they finished up their iWork training. That database is now live for us to manage. Dave Burrows will continue on with his training this week, 322 and 325. Safety and resource grants, the zombie and abandoned properties grant, round 1 is $47,500. Rihanna has also completed her training and is now certified through the state as a building inspector. And I have one resolution to increase the Ticonderoga Police Department petty cash fund from $200 for a petty cash total of $300.
You move it?
Yep, I'll move it.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Meeting, our next meeting is April 27th at 8 a.m.
Okay, highway?
We met on March 23rd. Present was myself, Dave Woods, John Deming, and Mitch Cole. We are still short one committee member, so we're still looking for someone to sit on the highway committee and transfer station committee. So if anybody out there is interested, please contact myself or someone at the board, and we'll get in touch. Others present was Joe Giordano, Mark Wright, Matt Fuller, Greg Swart, and Joyce Cooper. We did have public discussion, and it was brought up to discuss painting a strip on the west side of Lake George Avenue from Montcalm Street up to Algonquin Street to set up a differentiated line so that pedestrians, if we're coming down the Shoot River Trail, could walk down that side of Lake George Avenue and have some sense of safety. And the highway department's going to look into that, do some measurements to make sure that they have room to do that without interfering with traffic. So that's being looked into. It was brought up that the highway department is under budget this winter for the use of salt and sand and the brine, and they have already started replenishing the material for next winter. So it's good news on that end. There were some repairs that was completed to a plow, which was submitted to insurance, which covered about $5,000 of a $6,000 repair. There was an axle repair on truck number 45 that was done in-house, which saved a significant amount of money as opposed to going out to third party. So hats off to the highway department for performing that task and getting it done relatively inexpensively. We do have some bids in, or a bid in, we're going to have a resolution on today to replace some sidewalks around town. And we'll be looking at some of the information that's come in and some of the complaints that's come in over the past few years on sidewalks so that we can determine which ones need to be done. We'll try to address some of the ones that's had complaints first, but we do have some plans to replace about 300 feet on Lake George Avenue at this time. There may be other sections of roads that will get repaired based on some of the complaints that's come into town. The highway department has added 2 other roads that they're going to resurface this year. One is Racetrack Road and part of Cannonball Run. still scheduled to resurface Canfield Road, which was on the original schedule, but we have added those other 2 roads. We are looking to replace the stoplight at Lake George Avenue and Montcalm Street with a 4-way red light only, as opposed to a red, orange, or amber and green light. So that will continue to be a 4-way stop. We'll keep the old light for parts or some of the other the older lights that's in town, so we can repair those. We have received our new street sweeper that was ordered, and I think most people have seen it being used around town. Got some photographs on it, and we expect to put out a press release in the not too distant future on that, showing it in action. So we're looking forward to that, and I think it's going to make a big difference on getting our roads cleaned and helping also with the water and sewer department, so we're not putting the salt and sand down through that plant as well. There was not much on the transfer station. The fencing around the facility will need some repairs this summer, so they're going to get that done. We did talk about grading down the gravel drive area up around the recycle section to make it a little smoother for the customers that come up there to use that deal. And then the old street sweeper and the grade all, Sal was waiting to the 31st to see if he could sell those outright to some other municipalities, and then he was going to see what he could do. If that was not the case, unless you know something has happened.
He got 5,000 for it.
He got 5,000
On
for
the
it,
auction.
he did on the auction. Okay, very good. And then, as mentioned, it was brought up that the Portage project was scheduled to start on April 1st, which that has been kicked off. And we do have 2 resolutions for that, for the highway station. One is a resolution to advertise for the Veterans Road culvert replacement over 5 Mile Creek, with monies to come through reimbursement through the Culvert New York grant.
I'll move it. Or second.
Okay.
Okay, Dave,
Mark,
you did. Mark seconded.
Either or.
Okay.
Tom's got it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Aye.
You want to post up here?
And the second one is, we had gone out for bid and open bids for the sidewalk bid, and those came in at the lowest bidder was Avery Energy to put for $4.56 a foot for 4-inch thickness sidewalks, and $6.83 a foot for 6-inch thickness sidewalks. So I'd like to have a resolution to award that bid to Avery Energy.
You gonna move
I'll move it.
Second.
it? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So
Okay,
carried.
just follow-up question is just, when is that determined, if that 4-inch, 6-inch thickness, is that in the scope of that?
Mhm.
You know, we have a plan that was done.
That's what sidewalks are, 4 inches and 6 inches under driveways.
Okay, so that was in some of that original drawing, and I just wasn't sure how much it
And when we
was
went
split
around and,
up.
Sal and I went around and checked on notice sidewalks.
Yep.
And a lot of them are on Lake George Avenue, which we're doing,
Right.
and a lot of them are on the Portage, which is gonna be taken care of.
Right.
So we had a couple in one on John Street that was bad, and then there was a couple on the main street that just need patching, really. It's nothing.
Right.
So I thought if those guys had extra concrete, you know, they could come down and it wouldn't cost us anymore.
Right, and the other thing is, I don't know, maybe you're gonna mention this, but part of the grant that we have is to differentiate between replacement and repairs.
Yeah.
In my mind, I don't know how you differentiate, because when you have to repair a sidewalk, you basically have to repair it anyways.
But the grant that we got, we haven't received a very little grant yet, right?
Oh, it's, yeah.
So the monies that we're spending now is what, town money, so that can be repaired or replaced?
No.
We
so-
appropriated $120,000. I asked Becky, She said we had 120,000 we put in the budget, but we haven't got the Betty Little grant yet.
No, we have the money from the George Rick Fund.
So I mean, back to Tom's question, can we repair? I mean,
No, so,
On our budget.
so the $100,000 that came from Betty Little was for sidewalks. I assume I'm pretty sure it was for replacement for sidewalks, so new sidewalks. That money is a reimbursement grant, so you have to spend it and they get reimbursed from it. The monies that we put into the new sidewalk replacement in the general fund and the sidewalk repair in the highway fund, two different capital reserves and two different separate line items.
yeah, we got through that.
Yeah, but 100,000 is for replace, 20,000 is for repair, so it's not together, they're separate. And we need, one of the things that Matt had drafted, but we need to get a little more clarification to what Tom's question is what actually constitutes a repair? And if you're setting up forms and pouring concrete, that's a replacement, right? So I don't know if repair would be, you know.
What is a replacement? Does that state any square footage in there? I mean, could we go down and replace one section of 2 foot by 2 foot? Is that a replacement?
Well, that's the
Because that's what
question.
we're gonna end up doing.
Right,
So-
that's the question.
So the
I
question.
mean, we're not repairing
Right.
a little hole.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe some of them have heaved over the years, right? They're kind of on angle, maybe you would
Well, we
have.
figured we'd just take that whole section out. You know, if there's a section that's heaved, cracked, broken,
But if it's not cracked, it's just heaved and it just needs to be reset level, you
well, you
wouldn't.
can't do that.
No?
You can't, no. You can't set that level. That's what we taken out.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Even if it's a small section, it's not?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. So we have to define it basically, so it's clear.
Well, I'm just saying, when I said repair, we're not gonna replace a little hole.
Well, therein lies the question,
You
is
know,
what,
like most of those sections are 4 foot by 2 foot.
Right.
Or something, so
right.
in that case, you'd cut that.
Yes, in my mind, that would be a repair, but we don't have that
So we-
definition. Well, we don't know. We don't know yet. That's what we've got to find out.
So we have to define it, and then we can expend it. That's it. So we have to figure out what criteria.
Well, we'll do like Jordan, and we'll go from there.
There's some DOT guidelines.
In the meantime, we can-
What each one is, so I probably use that.
Yeah, and the one capital
Most of
reserve,
the sections we're replacing are 4 foot by 3 foot. If you're just checking into it.
Yeah.
When you replace them, are they gonna be a 5-foot width?
Not, if they're 5 foot, yes. If they're not, you can't go with one section out 5 feet, and the other one 4 feet.
no, I thought that was what the plan was, because we had the.
Now, we're talking repair or replacement of the existing, like on Main Street. If they're 4 foot, we're not gonna pour a 5 foot one.
Oh, no, right, yeah, of course, yeah.
All right, so we've awarded the bid, and we have a tentative plan, we just need to clarify the definitions, and then, you know, what's actually gonna be done through, like, your survey and what Sal has, and so we could probably do that in the meeting, or bring Avery down and do a ride around with him, right? Or-
Yeah,
yeah.
he's gonna, he come down Saturday and I took him around, showed him.
Okay, did you get a first, second, or all in favor?
We did, before the discussion.
That's right, it was after you asked that question.
Can I ask another question? Is there a timeline for this? When is this gonna
I
happen?
think he's gonna start right off next week.
Really? Wow,
He's got to coordinate with Sal, because they have to take the sidewalks out.
great.
So once we tell him that, I told him, he would go bigger, but once he does, he said he would get all the sound.
Good.
And then the last thing on the highway meeting is the next meeting is scheduled for April 27th at 9:15 in the morning.
Good. Joyce, building.
Did you have anything before I start?
No, I've done a lot of minor repairs on buildings that nobody cares about. I can go over them if you want.
I think people do care.
I care.
I care.
Right there.
Public's paying for it.
Well, we
should
got
know about it.
furnace repair, electrical problems, the armory, sink leaking. Tanya complained about a sink leaking. That was one, and then we had one at the armory that was leaking, and electrical at the library, and electrical at the airport, which hasn't been resolved on the lighting.
Yeah,
He's coming,
okay,
but that's just minor stuff that
yeah.
I didn't think you guys would care.
I'll help you.
It's not for us, it's for the public.
No, I know, but
Okay, so I guess I'm on
I
next.
figure anything over
Yeah.
300.
We met virtually on March 16th, and I have to say that this was one of the most productive meetings that's been held recently for Parks and Rec, and we determined some next steps, which is a good thing. And it's a pleasure for me to work with community members who are dedicated to our park system and recreational opportunities. Let me tell you what's going on. First of all, with the basketball courts. I think I've mentioned this before, but Monty Benedict is working on an Eagle Scout project, and he put it out to GoFundMe and was able, with a matching grant, not a matching grant, but a matching donor, to raise $23,000 for the project. So go Monty. And his main thing is to get the blacktop up to snuff. I think he thought he needed to replace it, but it appears he doesn't need to do that. So it gives him some other money to go further with the project than he had originally planned. And I'll have more to report at the next meeting about that. In terms of the budget for Parks and Rec in 2021, $30,000 has been allocated, and we're going to do a good job of spending it. Through last year's and this year's budgets, and by taking advantage of sale prices, all the town's holiday decorations have now been updated and upgraded with new strings and LED bulbs installed. And I have to say personally, I think the decorations were very important to bring a little bit of holiday brightness to the community during the COVID pandemic. Budget monies will also be spent on playground equipment, repairing the tennis courts, some signage, bicycle racks, annual flowers, possibly a message board for the beach, and miscellaneous small items. Bicentennial Park. Once the snow is gone, which it is now, and the ground has thawed, contact should be made with Essex County Soil and Water so we can move forward with the improvement of the walking trail. And our focus for improvement will be the area near the children's playground, because that's the most heavily used section of the whole walking trail there. Bill Dahlbeck also reminded the committee that in 5 years, the park will celebrate an important anniversary, and he suggested a 5-year plan for the improvement of the park, especially the walking trail. And this suggestion was received with enthusiasm and support of all present. Another park improvement, the children's playground, was also discussed. And I'm pleased to announce that the Ticonderoga Kiwanis Club Board voted to donate $5,000 for new equipment, and will help as they can with the installation. I have more to say at the end of this. We also received a small donation through Cycle Adirondacks for the playground, and the new equipment will include a new swing set, a slide, and possibly another piece of equipment. The playground area may have to be enlarged. We're not sure yet, because there's something called use area that has to be all figured out before we put anything in the ground. And we also need to check with Derek Fleury to make sure that where the water lines are around there, because I understand there's one very close to the playground. Before I forget to ask, if Kiwanis is giving us $5,000, how do we accept that donation? Because it's going towards the playground equipment. I'll tell you this right now. We're placing an order right now. It's up in finance right now, and it's for $11,000. So, do they make a donation to the town?
Yes, and they can designate it that it's a donation specifically for playground equipment in the park, Bicentennial Park. And give it to me so I can.
Okay, so I'll tell them how to manage this.
Yeah, now can accept a restricted gift.
Want to do it right. Another thing discussed was the Montcalm Street clock. You may have noticed it hasn't been working for a long time. I think periodically it cuts out and stops working, and Tony has to get on her step ladder and go fix it. What happened this time is National Grid cut the power to the clock because they noticed a plow had hit and damaged a wire.
That's one of the repairs we did.
Yeah.
The conduit's all fixed, and we're waiting for National Grid to rehook, and then Tom's gonna come down, the electrician,
Okay.
and try to,
So this is a good update. So I'll skip over.
him and Tanya are gonna do it.
Yeah. Gonna put it in the lift truck.
No.
The one problem we do have, once it's working again, is that the clock has 4 phases. The north and south work together, and the east-west phases work together, and they don't always like to work together, all 4 of them. So we'll turn it back on and see what happens. But it was discussed that maybe we need to consider if they're out of sync again, rather than having somebody go climb up a ladder periodically and adjust it, that maybe we just block off the east-west faces and just use the north-south. So that's something to think about. We haven't made any decisions
Not
yet.
to interrupt you, did Tom say that Niagara, or National Grid, I asked him if he could apply to get that rehooked up, or if the town had to, and he said the town had to.
I've got
Did he talk to you about that?
yeah, we have a call on them, we're just waiting for them to
Oh, okay.
come done.
So, because I thought I could just have him go up and do it, but he said it had to be the town, so.
So hopefully people will be able to set their watches by it, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. We'll keep our fingers crossed. The Whiteley statue, I'm calling it, it's actually Robert Rogers. He's still sitting over in the gallery, art gallery, and we're hoping that he will finally be installed, and the committee has set a goal of July to have this happen. Grant Spalding has agreed to lay the necessary concrete for that, and a volunteer named, I'm sorry, I can't remember his last name, will oversee the building of a structure needed to protect the statue.
Did Grant tell you that what we went and saw him? There's not gonna be any concrete, he's gonna put a gazebo up, this Nathan.
Yeah, no, that's why the concrete
So
is
there's not gonna be
required.
any concrete at all.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I know he's not doing the
Yeah.
concrete work. The money, there's money raised by Roberta Whiteley in a special fund held by Montcalm Street Partnership. So there is some money for construction costs. And Bill Dahlbeck also announced that there will be some new wayside markers. I think we have a wonderful set of historic markers in our town, and most of them have been very well maintained. And he said there will be new Knox markers installed around town, one near the Liberty Pole and Recreational Park, one at the Mossy Point Boat Launch, and in Corellian Park across from the sewage treatment plant. And that's all I have to report now. I'm just happy that we're getting an order in for playground equipment, and I hope it goes smoothly from here. Our next meeting will be April 20th, and we will meet in person.
Very good. Mark, you?
All right, we are, the current programs are on hold because of COVID and not opening facilities. We're in mode of looking for team members for, through our beach advertisements for lifeguards, and well underway with that. We have interviews scheduled for our recreational leadership positions for a week after next. Joe and I will be leading that. We'll have somebody from HR consultant and then help us do that, and hopefully have a good candidate come out of that. So have them in place for our summer programs and leading into back to normal in the fall with after school and our other after hours programs as well. And then that pretty much wraps that up until we get to care of. Next meeting will be that week of 22nd.
There you go to the armory, right?
That means that the armory is, and then it's noted on the meeting schedule.
27th, I think.
Yeah. Tom, do you have anything from the seniors?
We've been no meetings and our one's still closed, so.
They've been playing pickleball.
Do you have anything for the municipal facility evaluation?
The municipal facility evaluation, we've, our goal of that committee is to look at long-term opportunities as far as use of our facilities and how they're utilized. And, the one we're focused on that has been identified quite a few years ago is the police department from a safety and practicality standpoint. One organization would be used as a benchmark is the Virginia's Police Department. And So we're looking at our next meeting at having Chief Markle come over. He's provided some input if he's available, or he's provided some feedback through our chief and through Mr. Woods as far as some feedback on some of his learnings. They have a facility, a 4,000 square foot facility that they went through, and they had some good experiences with that, and some things that they learned from that. So, we've looked at a number of potential solutions in the past, and so that's where we're at right now, is that the next meeting is planning on reviewing those, where the things that have come up in the past, and this presentation I'm working on right now, what some of the potential solutions are, and then discussing those. We've thrown out, the things are out there. Do you rehab or use the current building? Some other potential solutions in the community have come up, including available buildings like Hudson Headwaters is one of the lowest building with the fire department. There's a lot of ideas, depending on who you ask. Or is a new building the right solution? Do have a number of candidates for the committee. Just need to get firm commitments and plan on appointing them, most likely at the finance meeting, but I expect that they'd be able to attend our next committee meeting as participants, but not on the committee. That's what we'll be looking at.
Mark, what do you see as a timeline for this? Because I'm sure you know, there was another offer made on that building.
Timeline as far
As whether to make a decision whether we're going to get it, or whether we're not going to get it, or
get what as far as
whether we're going to purchase it or not.
you're talking about Hudson
That's
Headwaters.
right, yeah.
Well, we need to, talk about that as a group, plan on doing that at the committee meeting. And one step we did take was to have an appraisal done, which we would need. We need to, here's one thing we need to consider, is we have a building that's, if you look at Virgins, for instance, they have a 4,000 square foot building. Our current police department is actually quite a bit less than that. And then the Hudson Headwaters building is a 12,000 square foot building with primarily 2 floors of 6,000 feet each. So if you use Virgins as an example, you've got 2,000 square feet per potentially in excess in the bottom floor, and then a full floor upstairs that we've talked about other departments possibly going in. And if we, with that shell game, move other departments in there, does that create a vacuum here of unused space? We have some of the things that would come up, or possibly moving town clerks over there, or DMV, or some other departments. But that would just create potentially another problem here. Just want to make sure, we need to talk about that with all the stakeholders about, what's the right solution without.
Yeah, but I just wonder if we should talk to Hudson Headwaters and see if we have a right to get first refusal. And just in case, because if somebody else buys it up from underneath us, the Virgins building is 1.3 million at 4,000 square feet. And we're getting 12,000 for whatever we come up with. So if we lose it, because of the time, just a matter of, would it be possible to get a first refusal? Ask them if they would give us.
I think that's a conversation we need to have with Matt and see if it's the right thing we want to do. And we could talk about some of those things before our committee meeting to see if it's, one, something we could even do as a municipality, because I'm not sure. And then two, if it's the right thing to do.
My point would, I think we should do it soon. I just hate to see it going from month to month, committee to committee, and board meeting to board meeting, and then end up in the end losing it.
Well, I think part of this committee was the same thing that was done with the multi-use building committee, in terms of understanding what the needs are for the town. We've talked,
I understand all of that.
Well, you do, but I'm just explaining it for everyone else, because everyone's had different involvements in this. So the key here is not that that building couldn't be utilized for some of the departments here, but then it basically can leave a void in this building. We know we have some tenants, like in the county, but we don't have enough necessarily to fill like the entire upstairs of that building, or even fill the void that would be left here if other departments left. So that's the whole point of going through the municipal evaluation process, looking to see what are our needs, and not just like, again, it's not just the sticker price for today's capital costs, it's also the operating costs, long-term, and all those
Oh, I
other
know,
things.
yeah.
Well, that's what we're trying to make sure it's a good decision sustainably for the long term for the town. That's
But they tried to send Mark and I, all the repairs and stuff that they've done in that building.
No, I know,
New
and
pumps
this is,
and
yeah.
roofing and all that. But even if we just utilize the bottom for the police department, we're still money ahead. And left the upstairs vacant until we decided what we wanted to do with it.
well, that's a conversation, I think I have to get some information back from the committee as to.
But I mean, based on a dollar square footage price, you know, and then 1.3 million for 4,000, and it'd be 6,000 downstairs for the police department, for 500,000 or whatever they're asking, 525 or whatever.
Then we need to bring it up to, you know, where it needs to be, which, we'll have some of that information. You know, AES can give us a good idea, and if somebody else has some numbers they can put to that, we can consider that. And that will be the next step discussion, but I can reach out to them and ask that question about, right of first refusal. I think if they had a viable candidate, yeah, that's something they would need to evaluate.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be worth a shot, just to
Okay. Do you have anything else on evaluations?
No, look forward to that meeting on the.
Okay.
Mark, can I just say something about the committee? About 10 years ago, there was a committee that did research for the police department. Have you contacted any people who served on that committee? I know Ross Kelly did, Raleigh Allen, I think you were on it too, I can't remember who else, but they spent a lot of
There's
time.
Ross Kelly and Ronnie Allen.
We have, you know, the reports that have been done that talk about the facilities.
They did a really good job.
They did, yeah.
It didn't work. Yeah, what they came up with did not work, and that's unfortunate. But there's some knowledge there. It just seems we don't need to recreate the wheel either. And I'm also really concerned about how long it's taken us to make a decision for the police department. It's just, it's a shame. It really is. And I think about my guys downstairs working in what I call the mud pit now. That's where beautification is housed. So I'm just hoping that we can come to a decision pretty soon. I don't know what pretty soon means.
There's no health insurance report, there's no contract negotiations. Tanya had 2 charter items that were received. One was noticing its customers that on or around April 15th. This year, Cheddar, which is on Spectrum Channel 221, will rebrand to Cheddar News. And the other one is on or around May 3rd, New York One News, located on Channel 215, will move from SPP Tier 1 to SPP Basic on Channel 1. These will be posted on the website as usual. And then as far as IT goes, I've got a meeting with StoreTech tomorrow to roll out the computers beginning next week. So we'll probably start with some of the smaller departments just to make sure we work out the kinks first. Maybe we use Tanya as an example.
Is everybody going to report or just certain?
There's like 30 some, yeah, a lot of so this is a multifaceted project. It's taken a little while to get it all coordinated, but it's not only new computers, but it's also connections to the server. So now we'll have networking, and then we'll have a shared file. Right now, everyone's emailing everyone all these files, and so we'll have a shared server. People will have permissions as to what they have access to. So board members might have access to certain committees that they're on, and a central repository for other information that is shared to us from our consultants and so forth, as well as the other departments having certain access, read-write capabilities. It's just taken a while to get there, and not everyone's fluent in how networking works. So we've been kind of coordinating a little bit of the rollout of some training and working with StoreTech for that too, so we can make sure that we're not just giving people more space to put stuff, but they're working together to make sure that that space that they're putting stuff in is being adequately utilized. So that's it. So before we go to the general resolutions, Tom, you had brought up about Lake George septic inspection program that was,
Yeah, just a little bit of history. There is a group of some community members from Bolt Landing and Hague and some other communities surrounding Lake George to try and get the Lake George Park Commission, who is authorized by the state to oversee any water sewer discharge in the Lake George Basin. And they're asking local communities around the lake to adopt a resolution basically saying that the Lake George Park Commission will look into and try to form a lake-wide septic inspection program. Right now, there is no unified program. There's no, every community has a different one or is non-existent. And as we know, Lake George is critical to some of the economic infrastructure around the area. It draws in a lot of tourists, so it's an important resource for our community. It is drinking water for not only part of Ticonderoga, at least for the immediate future, but a lot of people up and down the lake use the water for drinking, so it's important that we maintain the lake, keep it clear. So we have been asked as a town board if we would adopt a resolution requesting the Lake George Park Commission to set up a lake-wide inspection system. So that's kind of the history behind it. And I think a number of other town boards, I think Hague and Bolton Landing have adopted the same resolution. So that's really the discussion of it. Has no impact as far as financial impact to Ticonderoga. The only section of Lake George that in Ticonderoga that would be affected would be those people on Baldwin Road, as far to my knowledge. I think all of Black Point Road, including Ty and Putnam, are on a town septic system, sewer system, so they wouldn't be affected. So the only people that would be affected at this point would be those on Baldwin Road, as far as I know.
Do they do inspections and enforcement?
The Lake George Park Commission is
If they find your system faulty,
if they find your system.
we don't have to do anything.
No, what they're asking the town board to do is basically say that we think it's a good idea to have a lake-wide standardized inspection. That's basically what it amounts to.
the new inspections take place upon?
Well, I think that's to be determined by the Lake George Park Commission. I assume they would be done anytime property changes hands.
Right.
Probably they would set up either a 5 or 10-year inspection program, but I think that's in the details with the Lake George Park Commission to establish once they agree to take it over. They're a little reluctant at this point, from my understanding, only because they claim they don't have the resources, the personnel, and that stuff to take that on, although they are mandated by the state. They are the authority to oversee that by the state. And that's why the resolution is to try to push them to take on this responsibility.
Okay.
Well, that would be an undertaking for them.
Wouldn't we need to make sure our codes are in line with what their standards are? And if it's more stringent than what, because we're inspecting them based on a local level, correct?
I think it's all New York
I
State.
don't know that we have an
It's all New
inspection.
York State anyway.
Everything that falls within the park,
No, but this is the Lake George Basin.
or Lake George Park, yeah.
Yeah, for Lake George, yeah.
This draft resolution that was sent out, that's the resolution we're talking about, just a few lines, there's not too much.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to read the draft that they've sent out, which some of the other towns around the lake have adopted, but whereas the town recognizes that Lake George is the economic engine for our region and that visitors are attracted by the lake's crystal clear waters, and whereas residents and visitors to our area rely on Lake George for their drinking water, and whereas failing and poorly maintained septic systems around the lake impact the lake's water quality, thereby threatening not only people's health, but also the region's economic viability, and whereas the need for a lake-wide septic inspection program has been identified by multiple task forces, watershed coalitions, surveys, and initiatives since the 1980s. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby requests the Lake George Park Commission as the entity empowered by the state to adopt rules and regulations for the collection, treatment, and discharge of wastewater within Lake George Park, to take necessary steps to develop a framework for a lake-wide septic inspection program. So that's the draft resolution that was sent to us by this group that's trying to push this forward.
Okay.
So we can open that up for public discussion if we want to, and have, or we can make a decision to adopt this resolution and do it at the finance committee meeting, or we can open it up for a public hearing.
I'm in favor of it. I mean, if you want to adopt it.
I am.
Yeah,
I think it's worth doing.
Matt, do you have anything to comment on this resolution from other municipalities?
Board call.
Yeah, I mean, anything else aligned with it, just in terms of, I mean, there's not really much in there except the need for one, not really specifying, how.
Yeah, it's kind of, I can tell you my experience with, right now it's Bolton and Queensbury, right? And it's kind of hodgepodge. They're not identical. Every time we do a real estate deal in each municipality, we gotta go back and take a look and remember which one's got which rules, because they're not identical. Uniformity may not be a bad idea.
Right. This is different than the one that was proposed to us, I guess it was Queensbury's, right, about 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because that one was, I remember that you guys.
When it was
there
sold,
some
the
issues.
property was sold.
Yeah, right, there's some issues about costs associated with it, so, okay. This is good. So it's more of a municipalities around the lake supporting this and having Lake George Park Commission kind of put something more formal into effect.
Basically for them to take over the duties that they're empowered to do by the state.
Right.
Because they have the ability to set up a lake-wide program.
What happens if one of the municipalities on
Yeah, right
in
now,
the Lake George Basin refused to do it, or didn't want to do it?
Well, like the Lake George Park Commission would take precedent.
They could
because
still-
Yes.
They could still go do
Right,
it.
yes.
So I guess, my question is, why do you need a resolution?
I think it's a resolution to try and push the park commission to take on this
Like a letter of
task.
support.
It's just a letter of support.
Show their support, so.
Right.
We are drinking that water. A third of the town.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a support or it's a pressure. I mean, these resolutions are crafted for all sorts of reasons. I don't know the politics associated with this particular issue. So I don't know if there's a reluctance to do it. I don't know if they're just looking for buy-in from communities. I haven't really, aside from the one that came out 4 years ago, that one was much more structured towards, a plan. This one's kind of open-ended, so I don't know what that does, but, I mean, it doesn't, if we're all in support of it, then we could let it go and have it as a May, just adopt in May, just so the public can be aware that we're having this discussion about this, but if there's any comment to be made by it,
I think it's just an agreement to support.
It is, yeah. But from this will come, like other things associated with the lake, sometimes supports of those things do have consequences associated with them. The gates at the Mossy Point boat launch and things like that, which then it's a delicate balance between protection and what people deem to be their right to a particular.
Well, I think the perception could be that we gave permission or approved or authorized, or whatever word you want to select, this additional inspection, right, which could end up in somebody having additional cost or mitigation or repairs or replace. So I would just like to make sure our message is clear on that, and I would prefer to do it in May to make sure that we get the appropriate message out as to why it's being done. Because it could be done with or without our support, correct?
Right.
Yes.
So that's why I'm just kind of questioning why do we, some of these resolutions to me like the one, another voting station.
Right,
thing,
right.
Right, is,
It's purely in the Board of Elections' hands. It doesn't really require that the town and the
the
council.
resolution is just for the point of resolution to me are kind of a waste of time. I'd rather be working on other stuff, like
Right.
getting the police department thing done. That's my only point with it, just sometimes we do these and it's just to me, it isn't the best use of our time or if it's all the communities around, we need to do it, I would just let the community understand, because it could impact them. It could impact them either way, but let's educate them before we do the resolution. So that gives us a month, a little over a month to do it, help send the message and craft it. I'm not against that, I think it's good to protect the lake. I just want the message to be clear for some of our most valuable properties and how people could be impacted.
Are we at the high end of properties in the Lake George Basin? I mean, being up at this end of the lake?
I am, you mean
I
in
mean,
value?
of the amount of properties.
The total number?
Right, like Wolf Landing, we would have more than Wolf Landing, I would think,
No.
because they're only on one side. I
Yeah.
mean, we encompass Lake George, or Baldwin and Black Point.
Yeah, but Black Point would not be affected because there's no septics on Black Point Road.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a town sewer, right? So the
I was just wondering if we were a big factor.
the only homes that would be affected, that would need to be inspected in
That's right.
the Ticonderoga area would be Baldwin Road.
Matt, do you have, we could probably talk with you later just about getting some of that clarifying language that Mark was talking about to kind of put it to a resolution, to kind of give a little bit more of the why, and the kind of the educational aspect. I don't know if have you seen any of the resolutions recently from any? No? Do you know of any other towns that have adopted or?
I know.
Okay.
Is this just lake property? Because the Lake George Park goes up into graphite. So I mean, would that encompass
Just
that
those
too?
properties along the lake is my
Just on the
understanding.
lake, the way that is?
That's my understanding. Now, I
Ginger,
suppose,
I see you joined us. Do you want,
I've been on all the time. I didn't want,
Ginger comes
can I say a few words about this?
yeah, normally we do it in public comment, but because we're on it, I saw you on it.
I wait.
You're
I can wait. I can wait if you want.
No, go ahead and you can share your comments.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. For those of you I don't know, I'm actually from Hague and was on the Hague Town Board. And so I gave this resolution, it's a grassroots movement, actually, but it does have the support of, the Lakewide Inspection Program has the support of the environmental organizations such as the LGA, the new LGA, which includes the fund. And it basically is not prescribing how the inspection should be done. It's basically just expressing the support of the towns around the lake that the Lake George Park Commission should take this on as opposed to individual towns. As you noted, Queensberry and Bolton have different programs, and Queensberry's is somewhat better because it's run by their the zoning, their code officers. They're doing the inspections, and they have actually found that and they're only doing it when a property deed is transferred. They've found that about 60 to 70% do not pass inspection, which is really concerning. And it doesn't necessarily mean it definitely doesn't mean they need a new system. Many of the repairs are very small repairs, but it means that there's something wrong and it could lead to leakage into the lake. So it's kind of a red flag that we're seeing. And we were told by the DEC that it would be good to just show support because of home rule issues by municipalities around the lake, and that then the state and the Park Commission would be more likely to address this issue. And I'm happy, there's a white paper that I sent to Tom, and I don't know if everybody's seen it, but it's about 4 pages. It just sort of explains the background. So I'm happy to have offline discussions with anybody if you have any questions about it before the next town board meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll put something together for next board, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll jump into regular resolutions. Resolution to accept and correct the minutes of the regular town board meeting of March 11th, the finance meeting of March 25th, Special town board meeting on March 31st and the town board workshop on the same day.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So carried. Resolution authorizing training and prepayment vouchers for registration, hotel, meals, and travel for Colt Russell for the water grade B operator certification course in Morrisville, New York, later in October. And then, I think I have the wrong one. It should be Derek Tanner and it should be Brian Benito. My bad.
Number 4.
Yeah. The three of them will be taking this technical training workshop online through New York Rural Water Association in the middle of May. Those 2 days, 18th and 19th. So I need a resolution,
I'll move
please.
it.
Thanks. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so carried. Resolution authorizing the creation of new budget, I'm sorry, this should be budget adjustments, authorizing the following budget adjustments.
Just moving the amount and the interest of the principal.
That's it, yeah, what was, yeah. Every year the principal increases.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So carried. Sorry, I'll change that. Resolution authorizing the following budget transfers. So in the first category, it's all from the A fund. This is the streetlight traffic repair. Dave had kind of taken it on to fix that. This is the one by Charles, right? And the second two are for some overages in library copy and printer maintenance and system fees, all coming out of contingency. And then also there's some additional ones for highway, some snow removal, highway seasonal on-call, that'll come out of contingency. Machinery, highway vehicle equipment repair. Trying to remember what for the highway revenue and insurance recoveries, offsetting the machinery, highway vehicle equipment repair.
I'll move it.
Is this, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
So carried. And then our resolution to pay the abstract.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So carried. And a resolution to accept the supervisor's report as submitted.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor? So carried. Tony, do you have anything else?
Well, I did want to mention Heather Johns, our library
Director.
she came in today and said that the library is going to be opening on Saturday, so I just wanted to
No,
mention
that's,
that.
yeah, that's a
Opening full
Yeah.
time, you mean, full
good
service?
opening for people
Okay,
coming in.
that's what I thought.
Starting on
I
Saturday.
thought she meant just Saturday.
Oh, I'm sorry. Starting Saturday,
And then
Starting.
regular operation hours.
they have good protocols in place.
Yeah, great, good news.
Yeah.
Joe, I just have a couple of, or a budget question, I guess. At budget time, we had talked about using some of our fund balance to pay off some short-term debt we had, and did that ever happen?
That was for the parent fund, yeah.
Yeah.
There's two that were, this is the SS 09, so it's a specific district.
Right, but, I mean, I just wanted,
Yeah,
I hadn't seen it, just didn't know if that actually transpired or not.
That got figured out, and they had a specific date in which, I think it was shortly after our board meeting,
Yep,
Because when they had to check to make sure it was exactly.
So we've been saving those interest payments.
Yeah.
Starting
For those two, right.
for those two, yeah, and it wasn't a huge amount, but it was,
No, it was something,
yeah,
several $1,000s,
Yeah.
yeah, like something, yeah, sure,
okay.
of
Good.
savings. Yeah. As far as the library goes, thank you for bringing that up. They're still requiring masks, social distancing, and they have a limit of 10-person patrons capacity, along with a 30-minute time limit for in the library. So I think they'll have these rules posted.
We're still not open down here, right, Tanya?
can't keep track of who goes down here.
Matt, we have our discussion, and we have one item pertaining to the solar pilot. You have nothing else, right?
No.
Huh?
No,
Okay.
I
So-
interrupted you.
So one of the things that we had been undertaking is trying to come up with a pilot agreement, and in that pilot agreement, figuring out a schedule associated with those costs for the solar projects that are taking place within the town, and what would be the amount per megawatt for those. So in consultation with the IDA, Essex County Industrial Development Agency, and NYSERDA, we've had some really fruitful discussions, looked at some comparative values from around other counties throughout New York State, and also had some proposals provided to us, and
Joe, one thing, just, I would let those, for those that aren't aware, that may be listening in, what pilot is. We've been listening to it, but we haven't known, but they may not know.
Yeah, good point. So pilots, payments in lieu of taxes, and specifically for these solar projects, they would set up a pilot payment for the first 15 years, and that pilot payment would not exceed the existing potential assessment of taxes. It would be something that would promote and be beneficial to the promotion of the statewide initiative for New York's goals, electricity goals, through renewables. 80% reductions by 2050, 50% by 2030. And so it's sort of an incentive, if you will. So anyway, we've been working on on understanding that process. And I guess two things really before the board are, the town doesn't typically handle, well, I should say doesn't typically, we have one pilot agreement, two pilot agreements currently in existence, but this could be something a little bit more meaty than just having two. Cumbersome, and especially because it involves a specific entity like solar development. So one of the thoughts was, and see the flavor of the board was to work with the IDA, because this is right up their alley in terms of what they do, and they would work with us. This would be something that they would handle the administrative aspects of. We would have control over setting the rates, whatever we decide those things would be appropriate for, but Matt would work with us to draft a memorandum of understanding with them, and this would be something that they take on. Ticonderoga was going to be a unique spot because we're the first municipality in Essex County to actually have a solar law. We've had some other conversations too at the county level for the other towns that are looking to develop their own solar law, so we're in a pole position, if you will. We've done a pretty good job overall with regard to how we roll this out. This is another component of that. And this could potentially serve as a model for the rest of the county, for the other towns in the county that are looking to also engage with solar developers for their constituent and the properties that they have to develop. So, so the first question is, how do we feel about developing an MOU with the with the IDA? Personally, I think it's we have a really good working relationship with our IDA.
Based on the information we have, I let the subject matter experts handle the details. It would be more administrative cost us locally we'd have to come up with. I mean, some of the initial data show that they have a good handle on if someone potentially it's a negotiation, right? So they're going to want a low number, and it seems like IDA is a good handle on that in the experience, and I'm comfortable with that, develop that MOU and working on that to do that.
Who else would we work with if you didn't?
Well,
we would
That's
take
what I mean.
we could take it on
Yeah.
and have the.
But I mean, it'd be stupid not to,
Yes, it was.
Well,
to take 10. You don't want me.
Tanya doesn't want it. Please.
No, so there would probably be some small administrative costs for
I
them
was
doing
just gonna
it.
say that.
Yeah,
what's-
but certainly this is in their wheelhouse, and it's much easier for them to administer this than it would be for us. But we would be working with them to do so. So are we all in agreement for that?
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, okay. So Matt, we'll go ahead and have you do
All right.
an MOU for that. And then the second, did I miss anything on that, though? Did you want to comment?
No, you hit it right on the head, yep.
Okay. The second item then would be establishing a threshold for essentially what is two different types of projects. You have the 5 megawatts and less, and then you have those that are between 5 and 20. So, and you have 20 and above. But I think we're only, right, and the ones that are over 20 would be a separate negotiation altogether.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so what we're looking to do is basically come up with a threshold for those solar projects that are 5 megawatts and less, a dollar amount per megawatt, and then those between 5 megawatts and 20 megawatts, $1 per megawatt for that. And part of what was discussed based on the historical data currently in effect in other counties throughout the state would be something of a $4,300 per megawatt initial year one cost, and then it would escalate 2% every year for 15 years. That's kind of what we had, through all the other analysis that we have received in discussions with the IEA in Essex, in NYSERDA, and other data, that's what we've arrived at. And then for large-scale renewable projects, ones in the 5 megawatt to 20 megawatt, they would be more along the lines of the $2,000 per megawatt with a 2% escalator for 15 years.
And just for clarification, this gets a little complicated, but the discussions we've had, and people might say, well, why are the larger projects
Right.
getting less per kilowatt? And that's because they are a large project, their funding is very different, and their financing is different, so it obviously costs money and stuff, so at the larger kilowatt per hour would make a larger project potentially unviable, and it wouldn't take place. So
There's more incentives for the smaller projects than there are for the larger ones, right? So, and there's less other opportunities for revenue generation or other offsetting credits. You were to say something, Matt?
Yeah, the economics are different. In a couple of meetings we've had with Ian from NYSERDA, who was just wealth of information on this. And it's really good, the research that they've done and provided to municipalities. But in working with him, the projects of 5 megawatts and under have significant subsidies. So their economic model is a lot different than above 5 megawatts, which is why the pilot schedule is a little higher for them. So if it's 5 and under, and most of these pay by a megawatt. So, like for example, we've got a project, I think one already approved, that's 5 meg. And they're all
just one other thing to clarify, I think, for the public is that the reason for establishing these rates is so that we don't have to negotiate individually every time a new project comes up for discussion. And that these rates are established so that somebody that's interested in putting in a solar farm can look at our pilot program or the IDA's pilot program that they'll administer and say, well, these are the town's rates, and they can run that through their financial model and see if it's viable or not for them to come in. But it removes the onus from the town to have to negotiate with each individual solar project that may come into town. So therefore, the established fixed rates, I think. Did I say that clear enough, Matt?
Yeah, no, very well said. And really, to Joe's point earlier, the town board, we don't necessarily have the expertise to be dealing with these on a case-by-case basis, You guys would have to relearn every time the different ins and outs of the projects. To Tom's point, if you get a standard schedule like this, and we get some standard documents, like the IDA has actual, standard pilot documents, resolutions, they know how to go through it. It just streamlines that process so that from an administrative standpoint, the town's not dealing with it. And I just think it's a very unique and interesting opportunity for the town to really work closely with the IDA. You guys have a great relationship with your IDA. If you didn't, this wouldn't even be possible. You'd be dealing with it on your own. With Jody and her team, they know this stuff in and out. And it's just good that they're willing to do this. And also, as Joe said, kind of move this as a model into the rest of the county. So maybe the other towns can get on board with this too, and they don't have to administer it either. It just becomes a kind of a uniform county policy. And that obviously each municipality can decide whether or not it wants solar. Ticonderoga always made that decision, and now we're here, going to benefit from it. So I think I've got enough. If the board is okay in contact with these things, we'll get back with some more formal documentation.
Great, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else? No.
No, that was the big stuff.
Yeah.
Still working on the water project, obviously. Probably saw the infrastructure programs and things like that, so we are still, right now, working with Department of Health and EPA. I had a good update with them yesterday. EPA, that is, brought them up to speed, hadn't talked to them in a few years. So it was good to catch them up, and we're clarifying what we need to have done for June. And I didn't know if I'd hear back from them by the meeting here, but I wasn't surprised that I did. It was just yesterday that I spoke with them. So as soon as I hear more from DOH and EPA, I will relay that back to the town board. But other than that, that's really obviously my top priority right now is that.
Good. Okay. Anything else you guys have? All right. We'll open it up to the public if there's any questions from the public.
Yeah, just one comment on the bicentennial clock. I know we've had some challenges associated with getting the clock mechanism to synchronize. But I mean, the clock's been around since the 17th century, and I'm not trying to put a probe on the surface of Mars here. So there must be a way to get some sort of semi-sophisticated timing mechanism here to make this work. The only thing I would say is, I believe even considering covering any of the faces of the clock is pretty short-sighted and not very good forward thinking. So just throw it out there.
Okay. All right. We'll adjourn. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.